We're live. Joining me today is Stephen Mitchell, known as Mitch. He's a good buddy of mine, and I'm really excited for this talk for the next 45 minutes. Even though your name on the thing is Steve Mitchell, you do go as Mitch. So I'm not going to confuse anybody. But Mitch, how are you doing today, buddy?
I'm very well, thank you, Nick. Nice to join you. The sun is shining in Essex. We're all good. Looking forward to chatting through.
So when you go to your LinkedIn profile, you have a couple of different positions. The one that I took for today was sporting people. But can you? I don't want to say that you're a guy with many hats, but you do a lot of stuff. Can you give folks a rough idea of what you do?
Cool, yeah, happy to. So I guess my two passions are sport, physical activity, and people. And over the last 7 years, after a 10-year career in the public sector, I kind of shaped and built a kind of portfolio of business interests that all connect those two things. So some of them are charitable endeavors. So I'm involved in a couple of brilliant charities around one around athlete transition, which is where you and I originally connected. Another one around apprenticeships for young people in sports coaching from disadvantaged backgrounds. I'm involved in some social enterprises, one of which I set up with an occupational therapist called Sport for Confidence, which is all about making sport and physical activity more inclusive for people with health conditions and disabilities. I'm involved in some learning and development companies. So I chair an Ofqual regulated awarding body called Transcend Awards, and an Ofsted regulated training provider that delivers funded training. And yeah, the thing that ultimately pays the bills is Sporting People. And that's a company I set up nearly 3 years ago with a colleague, a guy called Dan Thorpe, who used to be head of coaching at tennis. And that's all about helping sports organizations with their people issues: recruitment, retention, leadership, governance, anything really. And I guess the subtlety of Sporting People is it's just an umbrella for the work that I've done really for the last 7 years in leaning in with organizations that are interested in making their people happier, healthier, more efficient, more productive, and ultimately delivering more impact.
Mhm.
So yeah, really interesting kind of mix of things. But yeah, sport and people are the two kind of golden threads.
When your world kind of evolves around sport, and mine has since I was a very, very young man, it's hard to fathom that not everybody is involved in some aspect or another in sport. But believe it or not, a lot of people aren't. So it's kind of hard to step out of the circle of going, do you know what? Why sport? And for guys like you and me, it's pretty easy to explain. But for anybody who listens to this who might not really be involved in sport, not be a fan of sport, may not have enjoyed it as someone in school, which is probably a fair amount of people who get put off of it at a school level. But they might kind of bop into a football focus or something like that every once in a while. So honestly, Mitch, why sport? Why has it been so passionate to you?
Yeah, so I guess the subtlety of how I've introduced myself and how I talk now is more about sport and physical activity than just about pure sport. And I'm sure we'll unpick that a bit later on. But I guess I was very lucky as a child that I was given access to and encouraged to play everything. So my mum was a speech and language therapist. She was always trying to use physical activity as part of her assessment and treatment tools for people that had had a stroke or a head injury or cleft palate. My father was an accountant, but the two of them played lots of stuff. So my Saturdays were watching one of them play squash in the morning, one of them play hockey in the afternoon, and then the other one playing tennis later on. So I guess I grew up around it, so it was in my DNA from a very early age, and it's given me so much throughout my life, and I feel very lucky to have done that. And like my mum would always joke that she was quick to chuck me in the swimming pool to learn to swim, chuck me on a pair of skis because it gave you that kind of uh, unbelievable sensation of achieving something up and down the mountain, and just got me involved in team sports, winning, losing, mucking in together, going on journeys together. So yeah, it's been an integral part of my life from a very early age. And when I left school, I kind of set out an ambition that I wanted to be a geography and PE teacher. So I wanted to teach, but actually I didn't just want to teach PE. And I guess probably 20 years ago, there maybe weren't as many roles in just a single kind of sports role in a school. So I wanted to fuse the two things together. I went off to South Africa for a year out before I then came back and went to Loughborough to do my degree. And I never really knew beyond the teaching bit what it could be and what it could do. And then I've been very lucky to be exposed to, engaged with, part of organisations that use sport and physical activity in its broadest sense for loads of different social outcomes, and absolutely teams for team's sakes to win things, but for better mental health, for wellness, for inclusion, for education, for teamwork, for leadership skills. So I think it is a domain that gives you so much, but I completely understand that there are thousands, millions of people that have had a crap experience, never want to go back, and it stands for all the stuff that they hate. But actually, the medium of physical activity, perhaps as language and nomenclature and a route back in, like you don't have to, no one has to play sport, but just living a more healthy, active lifestyle and walking more regularly or using the principles of active travel or cycling to work or cycling to school, they're all really simple things. I think that most people could make some small adaptations to their everyday life to move more, and ultimately the benefits of moving more are plenty research, far better and broader than me. But yeah, I guess the thing for me at the moment in all of those domains is, yeah, let's just get people moving more, and let's get physical activity more embedded into parts of society that, yeah, see it as alien or don't see it as something that they would normally do.
I love that because you're pointing out that the word sport has different connotations and different meanings to a lot of people. A lot of people, when they think of sport, they think right away about competition. You know, it's about me and me against the rest of them, and I got to win and can compete and high performance and elite and all these different kind of expectations that go along with that connotation. Well, that fits under that umbrella of sport. Um, what what's the sport culture that you were brought up with? If you can kind of put that into um, a few sentences or an explanation about what was the sport, what did the word sport mean to you as you grew up?
Um, I guess sport for all was the thing that I grew up with because I played lots of things in lots of different domains and environments, and it just, I wouldn't say life revolved around it because life was much bigger and more more enriched than that. But yeah, I guess I was a decent swimmer, so we were early morning swimming. I was a decent cricketer, so we were to Edgbaston, going from Coventry to Birmingham twice a week. I was a decent rugby player, so we were traipsing around. So yeah, I guess what you realize now as a parent is that your schedule fits around your children almost. So I guess most of our weeks, most of our holidays were to uh, Cornwall, but to a venue that had a golf course, tennis courts, squash courts, a swimming pool, bowls. Like, and I was an only child, right? But
Mm.
we found a way of playing everything together, and we fell out, and we loved it, and we hated each other, and we stropped and had tantrums and all that stuff that is involved. But yeah, an exposure to all of those different things, and each one gives you different things, right? Depending on how you embrace it and how you approach it. Because swimming, single-minded, early mornings, like
Cold
sacrifice,
water, cold
cold
water.
water.
Hated it.
Rugby and cricket, teams, and identities and tribes.
Mm.
But and that's one of the things now as a parent. I'm desperate for my kids to start to be exposed to some team sports. They all love
Mm.
dancing, they love swimming, love cycling. I'm just trying to expose them to some netball or some football, just to win together, lose together, and rely on other people, all those kind of things. So that's probably a very long three sentences, but yeah, it was yeah, it was everything, and it exposed me to adults and people from different social backgrounds and different um different environments. Like my father in the kind of cricket and hockey worlds, it was very it was a boozy environment after cricket, and I grew up in bars, like pictures of me standing on stools ordering drinks and stuff, and yeah, mum, the other side of the equation, like would play a sport and then she'd be gone and home and looking after the rest of us. But yeah, so yeah, lots of different, I guess, experiences as part of that journey.
As you were talking, it was just bringing me back to my childhood and um, how sport brought my family together. Like when I was going off to a hockey tournament, my sisters would come along, sometimes not always willingly, but they would come along, and we would always end up having a few meals together. And it was very much a family thing that the one sport brought us all together in. And and I think, as you were talking, I was just thinking about all the things I learned about connection and community, and a big word for me is always accountability. So if I was to swim, I would not have been a very good swimmer because I wouldn't have anyone to be accountable to. Because as soon as I dip my toe into the water, I'd be like, no way, I'm out of here. I went straight for the hot tub. But when it came down to when I was playing, ice hockey, and it would be like either a real cold winter morning or a really damp evening, here playing in the UK, when we would get ice time, sometimes I really just did not want to go. But I always found that I thought about the guys that I played with, and it's like and it was so easy to be like, guys, I've got a bit of an injury, or I just want to rest up. Or at the time I was going to university too, so I could easily have just, oh, I've got classes in the morning, and everyone would have been fine with it. But there was this deep feeling inside of me that I was part of something, that bigger than me. And I think that was always, I wish that it went into more of my personal life. But I know with regards to sport, it was really feeling a part of something and feeling accountable. And it, those are the things that we always think sport and it's about physical activity, but there's so much more to it. And how are you finding that by changing the message from playing sport and competition to one of like kind of physical well-being and a holistic approach to an athlete, or you don't even have to call them athlete, but just participants? How do you find the messaging? How do you change the messaging to make it more inclusive to people who might say, I don't want to get involved in sport, but I'm willing to try something different?
Yeah, really interesting. And I'll try and pull on, I guess, a couple of different examples. I think, as you say, that the language to many people immediately puts them off because they've either had a poor experience or they can hark back to something that, yeah, doesn't bring back great memories. And I think if you take a kind of traditional leisure centre environment that are, I wouldn't say ten a penny, but there are plenty of them dotted around the country, right? I think if you walked in there and let's say you hadn't been active for a long time, whether you were lacking confidence, overweight, lacking mobility, doesn't really matter, one of those categories, you walked in the door, historically, for the last 25 years, I would say the first question would be, could you just go over there and see the membership team?
Mm.
And you're immediately, I think the reaction would be, I don't want to be a member. Like it's taken me 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years to pluck up the confidence to find my trainers again, buy some kit. So the moment you send me over there, like I'm running further out the front door away from this centre than ever before. So there's a piece there about what sport stands for and what physical activity stands for, and going to the gym or swimming stands for is everything that the people that don't do it hate. So unless we can show them, and that's where the campaigns around This Girl Can and We Are Undefeatable start to kind of very gently bust that myth. But if we continue to present sport as sports for sport's sake and come and take parts, you get all these things, and not acknowledge that harm does happen, it's not always perfect, that in many respects it can be as bad for your mental health as it can be good. And I say that out loud a few times, and you kind of get people's heckles up, and it's like, well, I think you relate it to, I don't know, the guy that makes up the five-a-side team on a Sunday morning. Like he probably knows he's not really like the one that maybe gets a bit of extra banter or abuse, or but like he's the sixth person. Like they'll always call him just in case someone else pulls out. Like you reiterate that message week in week.
Mm,
I'm not really welcome. I'm the goalkeeper. I'm picked last. I'm not really part of the team, but I just make up the numbers. That's not good. In the
mhm,
same way as some of them might be there saying, "Well, I'm struggling at work. I'm struggling at home. This is my release." So we have to be a bit more open-minded societally to understand that yeah, the stuff that you and I have played and been part of is absolutely not for everybody. So don't just say, "Come and play rugby." Come, like the journey to get there and what it looks, feels, smells like when you arrive has got to be so different. And for many years in this country, we've adopted this kind of come and play sport. It's good for you. And the narrative in the last 18 months in particular, a bit before that, is really starting to shift to this isn't good enough. It's not good enough that swathes of society are inactive for a multitude of different reasons, not just from a sport or a physical activity perspective, but for social connection and cost of the health service and all those things. But that challenges the guys that people always joke about the tennis club, right? Tennis opening up, great idea. But I play on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on court three at that club. So don't start bringing other people in at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning because but please open up. Please let's open up to community. But don't move my session or my that's and in the same way as we are limited in many respects in parts of this country with stock for playing stuff and astroturfs and leisure centre facilities. So with the demand increasing, like some of those people that will already play and will carry on playing, whether there's a hole in the changing room roof or the showers are a bit cold, have got to understand that there's more to sport and physical activity than just my team, my club, my environment. And that's a significant shift for people that
mm,
for many years have just said, let's just get people playing my sport.
yeah. Whew, he said so much. It made me think just towards the end there though about like, am I in it for me, or am I in it to become part of something? And I was thinking about the tennis guys, and I see those folks at leisure centers, and it becomes their space, and they get upset with you if you want to try to work in with them on a bench press or something like that, and they're like, "This is mine, this is mine," and and so there's this different of the mindset of the participant, but then I think the mindset of the people who are trying to create the space, I'm really interested in that changing to becoming this kind of welcoming and inclusive space where I don't think enough attention is put on people who are actually operating these spaces. It's very much like come on in, and once you're in, you look after yourself, rather than having. And you talked about smells, and that really, as soon as you talked about the different smell going into somewhere, like I remember the first time my dad brought me to a boxing gym, and it stunk different. And I say smell, it stunk. It's a different kind of sweat. It's mixed in with other things. And it's very, very frightening. But there was like this guy who was just like, come on in, stick some pads on, let's give it a go. The very first day I was sparring and I got a nosebleed, but it was just this guy's attitude and welcoming approach to just making it really fun. And then I didn't feel like I was invading any spaces. I felt really welcomed. And I think that if leisure centers and sports facilities and all kinds of clubs and football clubs and rugby clubs can kind of adapt this kind of thing of just you all are welcome, and let's come on in and let's figure it out a way so that so the individuals can feel a part of something rather than I'm just in it for me, does that make any sense? Because you said again, you say so much and it's kind of hard to like focus on one thing.
No, it makes loads of sense. And so I have, and I tell the story about my mum, right? Because 7 years ago, I was lucky enough to meet a lady called Lindsay Barrett, who's an occupational therapist locally to me in Billericay. And she had been running a kind of program from the NHS. So she's working for the NHS as an OT, where she was trying to use sport with the clients that she was referred to. And these were people with mental health conditions, dementia, learning disabilities. And long story short, 7 years later, we've now built a really successful social enterprise called Sport for Confidence. And we've had ups and downs and bumps along the road. But the key principle of what Lindsay wanted to do in day one and what we now do is we place occupational therapists into leisure facilities. And we say to make them more inclusive. We have an ambition to place an OT in every leisure centre in the country. But why? Well, number one, they're trusted by the referral network of GPs, psychiatrists, social care practitioners locally. Because at the moment, you wouldn't bring your clients to a leisure centre because you probably get sent to membership. It's probably not very inclusive and it's probably not very welcoming. Really broad brush statements there. But so our ambition, place an OT there. What Lindsay's taught me, I guess, and this is what my mum used to, is embedded in here somewhere, is that this idea of sport and physical activity for assessment and treatment. So whoever walks through the door in the 12 centres that we operate in are treated as an individual, as a human being, first and foremost, because you don't just have one condition. You might not just have a learning disability. You might not just have cerebral palsy. You might have other things. You might have anxiety. You might have some depression. You might have some musculoskeletal stuff that you need to deal with. So she breaks it down to a person-centered approach. Sounds easy, but she then says, well, actually, the best thing for you to do is come to our Love to Move gymnastics session. The best thing for you to come to is our swim aqua exercise session. But what she's done in the last 7 years and what we continue to do is build confidence and rapport with the centre staff, that when these people do arrive, they feel a bit more comfortable in dealing with them. Everybody pays to come in, like every other client that goes to that centre. So there's a transaction at the reception desk, which means that the clients get used to using money, which they might not do everywhere else, which means they have to have rapport with the receptionist. I would like to come to X session. And ultimately, each activity, I guess, is mapped to the outcome that needs the most benefit for that individual. So trampolining is all about taking turns and queuing up. Table tennis is all about communication, and swimming is not just about the therapeutic use and the so each sport, I guess, is broken down into things that aren't just playing the sport. So actually playing bocce or playing cricket is the seventh thing on the list, because personal hygiene, interacting with others, using money, communication, wiping down, whatever those things might be, those are the more important life lessons that sport can teach you. Even beyond the domain that you and I talk about in terms of teamwork and leadership, it's really basic, everyday occupational functions that some of the individuals that we work with can't put into practice. So actually the use of the centre and the activity helps them improve their life. And we have a hashtag, which is play your part, because everybody's got a role to play in making sure individuals can access sport and physical activity in a safe, inclusive, welcoming space for whatever end goal they want, whatever that might be. And if you went to Basildon Sporting Village today, you'd see 80 people in the hall with carers and parents playing bocce. You'd see 12 people swimming, and they're not segregated, they're not marginalized. They all have lunch together in the cafe, and it's taken time, but it's now a centre for everybody. It's not just a centre with a nice swimming pool and a gym that's run by everyone active. It's a place where everybody can go to feel welcome, to feel included and take part.
Beautiful. I'm going to come and visit. I'm not going to swim. I'm not going to swim though. Even though my body would probably enjoy it. You mentioned about becoming person-centered. So really, this is a responsibility, I believe, for facilitators of sport, whether they be a leisure center manager to an assistant coach, anybody who's facilitating or helping make that sport possible. And it was something that was actually on the F word, right? One of the people was talking about athlete-centered. And you've got, especially with teams of like 20 plus people, you've got a facilitator, coach, management, owners, and then you've got these athletes. And I grew up in a manage the team atmosphere. So if an individual had an injury or trauma, of some kind or was dealing with some personal issues at home, it was never even noticed. It was never discussed. It was just kind of like, you are here to play ice hockey and that's it. And now, because of what we're learning and because of experiences of just someone like myself who had physical and mental trauma as an athlete in my teens, carried that through to, I think you even commented on the fact that yesterday I had a cortisone shot, through on social media. That was all because when I was 14 and a half years old, I got hit so hard in an ice hockey game that it popped my hip a little out of place. And I wasn't allowed to ask for help about it. And it's the only time in my playing career that I crawled off the ice. Every other time we skated off the ice, we never ever showed that we were hurt. And I had to crawl off the ice because my leg didn't work. And eventually, being at a young age, you kind of move around a little bit, you pop things back and you're okay. But it made a nodule grow. That trauma created a nodule on my hip, where now there's going to have to be surgery for a hip replacement. And this was all because there was no idea of athlete centered, because it was suck it up, you're part of the team, you got to get back out on the ice. So these traumas, Mitch, have come with me all of my life. And it was like, this is what I was thinking sport was about, was this kind of, don't, and you know what ice hockey's like. I mean, guys will like spit their teeth out and continue to play because we're just taught that. And then working with Misha Jarvis is this idea of what these traumas, these physical injury traumas can and the impact that it can have on athletes. And you mentioned sport not being for everybody, and I think that it's something that the culture of sport is evolving, and because of things that you're doing, because of the things that we're doing, where facilitators of sport needs to step up, and take more responsibility for the people that are coming there for just a bit of fun, or maybe they want to make the Olympics one day. But we have to be able to put people into categories of, I'm going to keep an eye on them, not keep an eye on them. I'm going to be aware of individuals in my team, because once they're together, yes, they're a team, but they all come in with different sets of baggage and traumas in their lives.
And different stories to tell, right? I mean, the interesting bit for me there, and not that you'd necessarily ever go back, like you talk about crawling off the ice. Would that coach now, on reflection, not be proud? Like, what would he say now if he could hear the story that when there was an incident that happened, and this was me, age 14, and this was the thing, and do you remember I crawled off the ice? Like, I don't think anybody in their right mind would have encourage that to happen, be proud of that happening, remember that happening, or ultimately, this is the space I'm in now, be taught that that's acceptable. And I think even if you look at the coaching kind of system now and what coach education is all about, it's increasingly less about technical and tactical and more about inclusive, fun, and welcoming. But actually, I don't think anybody, even in the highest echelons of Olympic and Paralympic performance, I'm not sure anyone's really encouraging athletes to hurt themselves. I know it's happening, but I think it's a really interesting balance because, yeah, I have a conversation with that now. Like, what he won't remember that incident, and I'm assuming it's a he, by the way. Sorry, he or she won't remember that incident, but does he realise the kind of long-term effect that that's had? We're in the same way as the kind of suck it up, put a cold sponge on it, spray it, run it off, get on with the game, all that kind of stuff. But again, if that's what's then acceptable in a team or a club, and it's not called out, then that's almost, I guess, where the problems come from, because people can get away with that and push the boundary a bit more and push athletes harder beyond beyond that red line.
I think it depends on what level of sport we're talking about. I think that if I look back at this individual, and I even remember I bumped into him, not, I don't know, quite a while ago, but he wouldn't have changed. And I think that there's mindsets that people are brought up with in certain cultures and certain parts of the world around what masculinity is like, and these ideas of what real men are like. And I think perhaps on the level that we've been talking about, which is that kind of participation and having fun for sport. I think that people are becoming more aware of the language that they use towards people who are participating, and athletes who want to try to just get a little bit better at something. But I think in that elite world, I don't think things have changed. And I think there's still an awful lot of abuse and trauma happening out there, especially at the high levels, because they just, like an athlete is a piece of meat and they're a commodity. And management and owners are just keeping an eye on injuries. And if it's an injury that is, the person's not going to come back from it, that person can get cut pretty quick from that organization and they're just discarded. So I think we've got a long way to go, Mitch, definitely the higher echelons. And I think even with me talking to the people that I've talked to about tough through tender, which you know a little bit about, but when I start using language like resiliency and compassion, their heckles go up. What's this compassion bit? What do you mean compassion? I don't need compassion. I need to have mental and physical toughness. I need my guys to go through a wall for me, and that's language that I was brought up with, and it's language that's still being used today. But I'm hoping that people, like, let's get into the bit that you talked about, that you said we were going to get into. Let's get into the bit about the participation and the physical benefits of what exercising does to the body, because I know that I'm trying to segue something into what I'm so to just again to kind of go away from that elite pressure athlete, but to the physical benefits of athletes. And I want to try to get into something around mindfulness, because we talk about, hey, it's great to go for a 20,000 step walk every few days and get that, because that gives you time to think and to, everything's connected. So what's your experience with kind of this idea of physical activity, but also kind of mental and spiritual aspects of what physical exercise can do for you?
Cool. So again, I'll draw on a couple of examples. So until August this year, I was lucky enough to chair the governing body for parkour and free running in the UK. And people always
Love
kind
it.
of chuckled when they were, well, Mitch, what are you doing that for? So, well, I'm doing it from a learning exercise. I'm doing it to put myself out of my comfort zone, but I'm also doing it because I took time to understand what the discipline and the movement of parkour and free running is all about, and the art form, right? Now, it's a non-competitive sport. So come back to one of your earlier points. So they don't have a competition framework. They don't have a set club structure. We don't have there's loads of stuff that we don't have, but it works. Communities come together to practice. They train together. They train as one. There is a whole message from the community, which is about start together, finish together, whatever the group, whatever the activity, whatever the exercise might be. But the key fundamental of it, it's about mind and body. It's about
Mm,
connecting to how you move around your urban environment, how you move around the house, how you move around in nature, and how you and I move and how a parkour practitioner is going to be very different. But that's okay. We should embrace that. So I think there are, I guess, lifestyle sports like the kind of resurgence of skateboarding and parkour, the
mm,
slacklining community, that where like sport is being reimagined and redefined. And I talk about, like, there's the BMX side, there's the urban sports, which I guess are the snowboarding and the pipe and all that kind of stuff. But then there's this other side of sport, which is redefining what sports experience looks like. So that's taught me a huge amount about togetherness and building a club. Wait, you mean we don't have to go on a Tuesday night and become a member? No, no, no. We meet at this location, we hang out, we move, we eat together afterwards, we story tell together afterwards, and it might take 3 hours, but it's not 3 hours spent half an hour driving to the club, 20 minutes warming up, an hour playing the game, showering afterwards, eating and going home. It's a far more immersive community cohesive network that's being built there. I also then was lucky enough a few months ago on the F word you mentioned earlier on. We had a guy called Dave Hembrough who came and spoke, and Dave heads up a strength and conditioning program in Sheffield. Uh, Very good S&C coach, has worked with some elite athletes, but a few years ago, and he won't mind me saying, had his own kind of mental health challenges. And he designed a weightlifting program that used mindfulness and classical music.
Mm.
So he now runs a program where, because you think about the free weights lifting experience, probably heavy metal or grime or like in the mirror, and
Yeah.
he flipped it on its head. So when you so he found classical music that helped make him better. He put the two things together then. So he's created an environment that plays classical music when you're lifting, includes mindfulness at the beginning and at the end, and so isn't is targeting a completely different client group, because lots of people want to lift weights but don't want to do it with spit and sawdust and banging music. Now, again, just people reimagining what that experience looks like, because you wouldn't think about lifting Olympic weights listening to Tchaikovsky or Beethoven, but actually, he's done some kind of, well, not even basic, that's probably better and fair, some academic research that sits alongside it that then proves that actually some people will live better listening to classical music in a very calm mindfulness environment, rather than those that come in and like we've got to have massive pump. And I think it's funny, all the behind the scenes stuff that you see now with England rugby and other teams about the banter in the who's playing what in the gym environment. But yeah, Dave's work and what he's done there, and there are a multitude of others, by the way, is just reimagining what that experience looks like. And I think it's magic.
In my experience, what I've learned is that my brain, my heart, and my muscles are all one. Mind, body, spirit, and the wholeness of it all together. Elite sport is all about the body. And I think there are certain people, I think that Phil Jackson, yeah, he was one of the first kind of high profile basketball coaches, when he had the Chicago Bulls in the late 80s and 90s with Dennis Rodman and Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. And he brought in mindfulness approaches because he knew he had so many different individuals on the team that through meditation, the team became more linked. So it's proof that things like meditation and breathing, if you want to use the word prayer, maybe even in terms of asking the universe for some kind of guidance, work. They work. They worked in my life. I've tapped into this resource. I just call it love, but a lot of, like, in our programs, we call it compassion. But it still comes around this language where a lot of people think it's like taboo, it's weak, it's not for the elite type stuff. And I'm sitting there when you've just talked about enough evidence that outliers who are bringing in connecting the mindfulness or spirituality approach to an athlete's development, they get results. And when is it, I know Misha talks about High Wycombe and what they're doing there. They're kind of outliers in that area too. And when's I'm just waiting for someone like Jose Mourinho or something like that, some kind of real, just to go, I'm going to try something. I'm going to try to get my athletes to tap into some inner resource, and let's just see what happens. But everyone's too worried about the bottom line.
Now, I don't pretend to know enough about it to talk with any great authority on it, but as I understand it, the work that Gareth Southgate is doing with the England team is like, whether there's loads of mindfulness and meditation, I don't know, but what he's building and what he's learning is the athletes are all human beings. They've all got stories to tell, and wrapping them into an environment where they're having a good time, where they're with their pals playing, like reconnecting to some of that. Now, he's been given a long time to do it, and hopefully even longer. And the results on the pitch, I guess, would reaffirm that. But there is pockets of it happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in some clubs and some domains, it's never going to work, right? But you need the thought leaders. I was listening to the Ben Ryan, Owen Eastwood podcast the other day. And again, Ben's stories about Fiji Sevens and the cultural, societal, prayer-based, song-based stuff that comes from that. Now, again, outliers, but starting to be put into places of influence where they can start to test and do things differently. And whether we see it running across the Premier League or not, I don't know. But certainly there is some fabulous work going on out there to embrace these
Yeah.
kind of principles and just the fundamentals of human first, athlete centered, or let's get to know you. Again, there was some stuff going around on Twitter last night about Steve. You talk about basketball, about Steve Kerr talking to Steph Curry, just in language about when he's having a bad game. I'm loving you. Your work is great. Your energy is, yeah, yeah. It's one of the behind the scenes camera stuff almost, but it's the taboo stuff that people don't see because they think, oh, you've got to be shouting and hollering and got to be winning. Well, no, just like put your arm around people a few times. And you talk about compassion and stuff. I just want to give people a hug, right? That's what the F word's
Yeah.
all about, is giving people a hug. And I think that goes a long way in sport and in life, right?
Oh, it does, buddy. It does. I think we've given each other a hug before, haven't we? When we had a coffee a few weeks ago. You just one word that you said that really popped out, and that word was play. And ultimately, isn't that what it's about? Is just playing and having fun. And I just got off watching a series, a short series about the Toronto Maple Leafs ice hockey team in Canada. And it's on Amazon Prime. I don't subscribe to Amazon Prime, but someone lent me their account because I don't want to give Jeff Bezos any more money. But the if you watch it, and this is a team that's under a lot of pressure to win. They've got one of the biggest budgets in the NHL, one of the highest salary caps. They're right at the limit all the time. And Mitch, they keep tripping at that first hurdle in the playoffs. They can't get past a second round in the playoffs. And when I watched the documentary or the series, it seemed like I saw about one guy, and he was the goalkeeper, Campbell, who was having fun. The rest of it seemed so machine oriented and mechanical, and they just didn't seem to be having fun. And I think that, can people bring back that idea of let's play, and like you say, that's what Garrett Southgate is doing with the England team. Let's just play together and have fun. And it takes away so much anxiety and fear in an atmosphere where, if we're operating under fear, we're not going to get there. If we can operate under the idea of let's play and have some fun, let's get there, right?
So people always used to joke back on the parkour story about, oh, you don't do parkour, or why are you involved in parkour? Is that, well, for all the reasons why I'm not involved is hopefully why I was a useful independent chair, because I didn't come with baggage or DNA linked to it, but I could see the benefit of it. And ultimately, when people kind of ask me that or snidey comment, I'd be like, well, when did you stop doing parkour? Because actually, I've never stopped because I love climbing on stuff. I love playing. I love jumping off things. Like when we go to school with the girls, like we do parkour at the high street. Like it's not parkour and but we like they jump on stuff and they sneak round benches different ways and they like climb and actually that whole enjoyment sense that we all got from that we kind of all forgotten. We've just launched a charity which is a Saturday morning 10 o'clock park play. So it's based on the same principles as park run, but it's at 10 o'clock. It's in probably slightly more urban parks, local parks than a park run park. And in essence, we've got leaders that open a bag of kit and we get families to play together, hit stuff, throw stuff, jump over stuff, but intergenerational. And it might not be conventional sport, but it's like we plant the flag 10 o'clock every Saturday morning. And it's just it's reconnecting with, well, actually a grandparent can play with a grandchild and a mum that's watched on the sidelines for ages. So you're not allowed to not join in. We'll find a way, the leaders will find a way of scooping you into the activity to help, to lead, to play, to chuck stuff, to hit stuff. It doesn't really matter. And I think, yeah, you're entirely right. We've all forgotten the spirit of play and the absolute joyfulness that it brings you.
Beautiful. Thanks, Mitch. Thanks for your time today. If you have any programs or any things that are happening, that maybe anyone in Central London could benefit from, just let me know, and I'm going to put them in the Facebook feed. But can you also just ping me any details, anyone, how you want people to get in touch with you, and I'll put them in the feed as well. But you can remind people how if they've been kind of tweaked by anything that you're saying today, how can they get in touch with you?
So LinkedIn's probably the best medium, and I've subtly or not subtly dropped the kind of things I'm involved in. So I've always worked on the basis, Nick, that if you want to find me, you can find me, and if you want to have coffee and break bread, then we can do that. And like as I said, I love human connection and I love a hug, and I guess the people in your network would hopefully share some similar emotions and feelings about how we reimagine sport and play. So yeah, always happy to have those conversations, my friend.
Thank you so much, brother, for this wonderful chat. I really, really appreciate it. And let me know next time you're in Central London and it's coffee and bread, food.
Wicked.
That'll be a donut, and definitely a big hug. Love you, buddy.
Top man. Cheers, Nick.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us. Don't forget to join me on Thursday at 11 a.m. for my Tough Through Tender gathering. Thanks everybody for joining us, and Steve and Mitch. Thanks very much. I'll talk to you later.
Take it easy.
Bye.
No worries.